And let me just grab a new document so we can take a look at why our tools are acting the way they are. So I'm going to grab a brush, get a nice dark color so we can see this white if there's any white coming through. I'm going to grab my pen setting and make a shape. I'll get my airbrush, make a shape. I'll get, let's see, what else do we use? Pencil, make a shape. Maybe label these, pencil, airbrush, and this is pen.
You have nice penmanship.
Thank you. So if I have my bucket on 0 expansion, then when I try to fill in these various shapes, we may see some of those lines that we were talking about. So these lines in here that aren't getting filled in is from that expand. If I back up a little bit and say expand, let's say 3, still doesn't do the airbrush, gets rid of it on the pen, and also gets rid of it on the pencil. The one time you would probably not want your expand to be 3 is, let's say I have some very delicate work. Whoops, let's get my pen. Let's say I have my pen way skinny. I have a beautiful drawing of an amoeba and I want it that size, but when I fill it a couple times or change the color,
it gets bigger.
It'll get bigger every time I change the color and I go, oh, I want it red. Whoops, oh no, I want it green. It's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger because it's expanding by 3 every time. So that might be a case where I want to put it back to 0 because I want it to stay the same size no matter how many times I change the color. But then you can see, let me zoom in more, that there starts to get this residual line from the previous color, like that's the dark blue. Or if I do it again, no, red is okay.
I can see a little yellow.
Yeah, see where now that's sort of reddish on the sides. So that's the problem with not expanding, is that it won't get these little edge pixels if I don't expand. But if I keep expanding, it's going to grow and grow and grow.
Yeah. Tricky.
So you probably weren't using the airbrush, but if you had used the pen or the pencil and you had this to 0, then that's the reason why it would have had those tiny little lines in between that do that. All right, so got that out of the way. We remember, got to check everything with digital art. Every time you change a tool, you got to check everything. Waves. So my sloppy little wave here has the general 3 colors that we were talking about. We want a shading color, we want a base color, and then a highlight color. So if I were to get a new wave going here, let me put it on. Yeah,
go all the way back to 0 and draw those white lines and everything again if you do not.
Oh, sure.
Mind. It doesn't take that long, and then I can do it along with you.
Sure. Let me just hide my layers and we'll do it again. Whoops. Water. Take off the white, take off that, take off that. Where's my splash? Take off that. So you know how to do this part? Or you want me to start from like a white piece of paper?
Oh, start from a white paper.
Absolutely, we can do that. Let's get a new one. Start from white. All right, so I've got a white page and I think to myself, I'd like to draw the ocean. So I get my pen tool, or if you want to make it exactly flat, we can just select the bottom part and then fill only the bottom part. Let me make sure everything is set properly. I've got blue. I'm on the right layer. Click that blue, Control D for deselect. So I could have a perfectly flat ocean, but I don't want it to be the same blue from top to bottom. So I need to protect my pixels. Protect alpha. I'm going to get a darker shade of blue and my original blue color. Grab my fading tool and I can make the darker at the bottom or I can make the darker at the top. With water, it tends to get darker at the top and more transparent as it comes towards us. So the light tends to be on the bottom. I think I might have switched it on this one. Yeah, I did. And that might be a little too far of a jump in color. I'm going to lighten my darker color a little bit and see what that does. Oops. Yeah, it's a little better. So I've got a fading sort of an ocean that's perfectly flat. Then I'm going to rename my layer so I remember what this is. Ocean. On a new layer, we can call this, what did I call it before? I don't even know. Ripples, reflections, texture, we'll call it texture. Texture. I'm going to grab pure white. Get a fairly large brush. I'm like at what, 30s? Of course, our page sizes might be different, but I want enough variation that, whoa, that's too big. Oh, I don't have sensitivity. Why, tablet? You betray me. All right, I gotta do a smaller brush then. If you were drawing with a mouse and you didn't have pressure sensitivity, here's what you'd do. You'd start with a smaller brush, and we're going to make like a wiggly diamond pattern, meaning they're crossing over one another. They'll basically fade out into the distance and we'll erase part of it later, but they can overlap. You can look up water reference for this. Lots of people have different tutorials, but we want to keep them more side to side, less up and down, so that we can see this as water that's kind of close to us. So you go nuts. You do all these little ripple type things. That one was kind of bad. I'm going to get rid of that one. But this isn't going to stay. This is going to get blurred. But just in case I need to use this again, I'm going to duplicate it. So now I have two of the exact same layer named texture. And I'm going to change one of these names to blurry. It's going to be the one below my actual texture. Not surprisingly, we're going to blur it. So I have to make sure my layer is selected and I go to the Gaussian blur, make sure that my preview is checked, and I slide the bar and let it go in increments until it starts to make these things look like they're glowing. Maybe about there. I got to 25 and it kind of looks like they're glowing. I'm going to say okay. But I also need some shadows. So I'm going to take my master texture layer, duplicate it again. I could do this by hand, but why when I can just duplicate? Call this one shadow. And I want the shadow to be a different color. So I'm just going to move the layer off to the side a little bit, and we're going to get this double vision. I'm going to protect alpha so that all my pixels are protected. Grab my paint bucket and choose a very dark blue. And then I can just hit the insert key on my keyboard to make those dark. It won't work until you have the paint bucket selected. Not sure why they programmed it that way, but you can hit the insert key and it'll fill them up. But we don't want the shadows to be that sharp. We want them a little blurry also. So I'll go back to filter, Gaussian blur, and oh, it won't work. Why not? Oh yeah, it does work. There we go. I'm going to blur them less than the light ones. I just kind of want them a little soft. But you can still see the shapes pretty good. And you can position it, you can play with the positioning, go like, oh, that's too far. They look like floating noodles. Oh, that's too close, I can't see them. So I kind of drag them just a little bit diagonally. Like that. I'm going to save my work so I don't regret it later. Oh, why won't it let me name my file?
Hey, Betsy, do you know what area scaling could mean?
Area scaling? Sounds
Yeah,
like making something bigger or smaller.
Okay, because I'm on my I'm on my I'm on my program and I'm using like the fill tool, like you know the paint bucket tool, and it's
probably don't want area scaling then.
So for some reason, I'm not succeeding here.
Oh, let me stop my share and take a look.
When I've got my 3 layers there. Can you see them?
Mm-hmm.
And then I decide I'm going to take what I've called the shadow layer and I'm going to Gaussian blur it. So I go up here. Oh, maybe it's because I have the. All right.
Yeah, all of your menus
shadow
look ghosted.
layer. Now they're there.
Oh, there we go.
And I Gaussian blur.
Mm-hmm.
It went away.
I think it's because the value is so high. I just moved the slider to the left. That's what happened to me too. It disappeared.
Oh, okay. There they are. Yeah, so I have to do this little slow one. Oh, there, now I like that. Perfect.
Yeah, that's nice.
All right, I'm gonna stop sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I think that's perfect, but it's okay.
It's getting there. So I'm going to set up my layers as shadow on the bottom, blurry on top of that, and then my master texture on top. And I don't want these to just abruptly stop. So I'm going to get my eraser and choose one of these soft options. So it should be on the bottom part of your brush options here. Pick a nice big one. And I'm going to take down the percentage, the opacity, down to like 25 or so. This means it'll just erase slower. And I'm going to keep lifting my pen and tapping it down like I'm painting almost to just
Where did you take the opacity down?
Over in your brush control.
Brush control. Oh, there. There we go. Oh, I see. Hey, that looks nice.
So I'm taking down my texture. I have to switch over to my blurry, do the same thing over there. Switch over to my shadow, do the same thing over there. It'll have a nice kind of like they're fading out. Getting lost in the distance.
Oh, I'm glad we went back and did this. This is much more interesting now.
And if they look a little too stark and bright white, you can always take down the opacity of the layer. Sometimes less is more, subtle is better. So I like to wiggle it around until I find something I like. I like it around 65%. And for the sky, I want a different layer. So I'm going to make a new one and drag it all the way to the bottom of the list under ocean. So I can fill the whole thing. I'm going to pick some very lighter blues, much more lighter blues than my water. And still use my Gaussian so that it'll fade from a little bit darker blue to a little bit lighter blue at the horizon. And just get rid of that white canvas that's a little bit distracting. I think I'll put all of these in a folder as well and just call this background and put all of my layers in here. Starting with the one on the bottom of the list and working my way up so that they'll stay in order. And I'll go ahead and make another folder for the splash. So normally for a splash, we need it to have something to splash against. So I'm going to also make another layer that's going to be like my doodle layer, my sketch layer, and say, here's where I'm going to have a rock. It's not drawn there yet, but eventually I'm going to have a rock right here sticking out of the water. Just as a point of reference. I don't want it in the splash folder though. I'm going to try to move it to the top. There we go. I have a layer named Splash in my splash folder, and I'm going to grab a blue from my ocean. And on my pen tool, so that it's a nice solid shape, I'm going to start making the water splashing up against this rock. And the simplest
So
sort
did
of
you
motion.
attempt to pick one of the blues from your ocean?
I did. I just kind of randomly grabbed one, though. I don't mind if it's the dark one, the light one. Probably not the white one, but it's a medium one. Kind of looks like a bird's tail. These feathers coming up. Then I am going to protect that alpha. So protect my pixels, can't draw outside of it. I'll get a darker color, and I can usually just pick one from my ocean. I'm going to make it a little less saturated. That means going to the left where it's gray. And I'll start coloring in, whoops, that's not coloring, that's erasing. But we can get rid of our rock for now. I'll start coloring in some darker areas. You can think of it like hair, shines on hair. I don't have my pressure sensitivity, so I can't make sharp points. So I'm going back and forth between my blue color and that color. Put in another layer there. Maybe if I shrink my pen again, I can just draw the outlines of a layer. Or the outlines of the shading, I mean. But yeah, very similar to hair. We're just going to follow the contour. I'm going to make the zigzaggy shape. So I'm working on the same layer, going back and forth between my colors. The more uneven it is, the better it looks. You can see this one where it has a little more of a serpentine going than this one on top. Looks a little bit better. Maybe I'll move that one up as well. Trying to make things uneven. You are always struggling to make things uneven. So we've got something like that, or if I were to look at my original when I had actual pressure sensitivity, you get a little bit better, sharper points on there. And I'm going to do pretty much the same thing on a new layer, just in case, so we don't mess up our splash. I'm going to grab my light color and do basically the same thing, but there'll be slight overlaps. If you don't want to draw outside of your splash, remember you can clip it. And then it will automatically stay there. And again, we're thinking like hair. Those shines on this water happening mostly at the curves, more like strands, even though this is the flow of the water. And then to make these like foaming parts at the tips, I will have to take another layer or else unclip it, which will show all of the places that they went outside. So I'm going to grab another new layer and add some like bubbling foam at the end. And have some droplets flying off. Depending how stylized you want your water to be. One of the most famous woodblock prints of all time. That great big wave. And it's really, really stylized. But you can put some bubbles on there. And we'll treat the part where the wave blends into the ocean pretty much the same way that we did the erasing on our texture. So I'm going to grab my eraser again, my soft eraser, go to my main splash layer, make sure my eraser is on a very low opacity so that I can just whittle away at it little by little, tap, tap, tap. So I get a little bit of that transparency that is a characteristic of water without erasing everything I've just done. And the beautiful part about layers is if you go, actually I wanted my splash a little higher, you can just move it because it's all in the same folder.
So why did you change that sketch to normal or to multiply?
So that I could see my wave underneath it. If
Oh.
it's on normal, then it covers up.
Oh.
Covers up my wave, but then if you set it to multiply, you can see a little bit of it, but it was still too dark, so then I just lightened it up again.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Just so that I'll have a little more visibility. So we've got our water texture, our splash, time to put in the rock. But if I add a layer above my splash folder, my splash is going to be covered up by my rock. So I have to move my splash folder to the top. Call this one rock. And grab a gray. Get my pen tool. And I'll just sketch right over my sketch. Make sure to close the shape. Make sure my paint bucket is on layer. Expand by at least one and fill in my rock. And I want to add some crevices and texture to my rock, so I'm going to protect alpha so I don't draw outside of it. Grab a darker gray. I really wish I had pen sensitivity, but we're going to kind of just add a couple of little segments here. And pick my lighting direction. I'm going to have my lighting coming from the left. So I'm going to color in shadows. Or excuse me, light from the right, shadows on the left. And your shadows will dictate the shape of your rock. So if you make your shadow line bumpy, that'll show more crags and differentiation in the rock. Get it skinnier as it goes into some places. Again, we just want it to be not symmetrical. Then I'm going to go ahead and duplicate the layer of my rocks. And I have 2 rocks. Here's one and here's one. And I want to flip this layer so it can be the reflection. So I'm going to go to layer, rotate, flip vertically. It might go right off your canvas. So usually you got to back way up and go, oh, there it is. I'm going to kind of get it underneath that one and lighten the layer. I might have to fill it in a little bit. Doesn't quite match up, but that's okay. I can do that. Just be sure that you do it while it's on normal and full opacity so that when you color pick, it'll be the true color. And then you can take off Protect Alpha, fill in that part, fill in that part. And when it becomes the reflection, it'll match up.
Oh, that's really keen. That's
Cool,
really
right?
good. That is fun. The reflection. Ah!
Yeah. And you might go, oh, but it looks too perfect. We shouldn't be able to see it go down that deep. We know how to make things disappear. You get your eraser, tap, tap, tap a little bit. Just get rid of that so it looks like it's going deep into the sea. Let's take off my texture so we can see it better. Whoops, they're all connected. But anyway, that's what it's looking like now, where you get your eraser and you just tap it a little bit out. Not a big difference, but if you find yourself where you go like, oh, it's so perfectly reflected, this isn't a mirror, well, then there you go. You just erase some of that reflection.
Wow. That is
Super
so cool.
right? Yeah, so fun.
Impressive.
I learned so many things today. Oh, it's not even over yet. My wave looks horrible, but I have a better idea of how to do it now.
Okay.
And it's all in a folder I can just get rid of.
That's right. And probably my first video on making splashes was a little better when I had pressure sensitivity. This tablet is not my usual tablet.
Yeah, what happened to your tablet?
Well, I couldn't find the stylus, and you can't really use the tablet.
Oh.
Yeah, you know, because I had 2 for when I was going to the studio, and back again I had a smaller one, but I couldn't find its stylus. So I'm like, well, I'll use my big one, but my big one doesn't have the driver on this laptop, and you know, all the technology problems.
Technology.
We've got a half an hour left. Shall we just practice reflections or do some mountains in the distance?
Oh, mountains.
Mountains. Excellent. Let's go ahead and make a new layer because everything's always on a new layer. Actually, let's save first. Save all my hard work. Save. Then make a new layer. Call this one mountains.
For me, I just did the thing. I'm also just the thing that we do with the trees where it's kind of like they get, you know, they like their color changes. They get lighter as they go in the distance.
Absolutely. Here's a way to do that. So let's say there's some kind of island back there and you're like, island, it's got vegetation. I want it to be green. And you stick in your mountain and you fill in your mountain. But it looks like a piece of paper. It's not very mountain looking yet. Because it's so far in the distance, like Michaela was talking about, atmospheric perspective, I'm just going to take down the opacity until it's a lighter color, matches the sky a little bit more. Color pick that. And then when I move my opacity back up to 100%, I can draw a mountain in that more faded color.
Oh, look at that.
Fill that in. And we again have the problem, well, it's just like sitting on top of the ocean. It doesn't feel like it's going into the ocean. So we grab our eraser. Where did my eraser go? There we go. Whoa, too big. Let's bring that size down a bit. Start tapping out down here so that it will softly blend into the water. If you want a little more sand or a little bit more of a beach, down there, I get my original color and then I just move the slider down to get those warmer yellows and golds and tap a little bit in there. Sometimes I use the watercolor brush because everything's blurry anyway. Grab some of the watercolor if you want, and the watercolor brush already has that like different opacity to it where it doesn't completely cover the color, it kind of blends with it. So when I'm doing my beach color here, if I just press lightly, it'll blend into the green. I can get the green, lightly stroke it in, and we'll get these like in between colors that can be nice and painterly. And we'll have that little bit of a gradation so that when you get back here, you go like, oh, look, it looks like a little bit of a reflection. It's a nice, cool color back there, much better than this super bright one. Let's get rid of this one. Oops, my eraser is set to tap, tap, tapping. Let's just get rid of it that way. So you have a mountain that's even farther back, just do the same thing. You can get your pen again. You say, oh, there's another mountain back here, but it's even farther away. Well, let's just make the layer lighter for a minute. Color pick that, put it back to 100, and make that mountain even lighter. Get my eraser. It's way, way back there. I should have moved this mountain lower down because, as we know, things that are closer to us, lower on the paper. Things that are farther away, higher on the paper. This would also be true if you had like a sailboat or, which layer was that? That one? If I want my sailboat farther away than this, then I'd have to put it higher on the water. If I want it closer than this, lower on the water. If I don't want it to run into the rock, it has to be either farther away or higher or lower than that rock. But yes, that's how you can get some lighter colors for your mountains in the background.
So you took down the opacity and then used the picker for that half opaque color.
Yes.
And drew with that. Okay.
Yep. And it makes it easier than just trying to pick a light green, because if I'm doing it on my own, I might pick something that's like too yellow or too bright. And I go, well, how come that mountain doesn't look right? As soon as you start using the slider, we're seeing the sky color mix in with that mountain color, so it'll harmonize a little bit better than the first one. Well, now you can barely see it, but it harmonizes a little bit more because it's using that sky color. Let's go back, 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 back. There we go. But any mountain that's this distance, I can just use the same green now and have some more rolling hills or mountains. Whoops, right over my rock. Go behind my rock. You go, oh, I want a beach. If you want this blendy painterly one, we go to our watercolor brush. I say protect alpha because I don't want to paint outside. And it'll blend those colors. If I do it lightly, if I press harder, it'll be a little more strong. Say there's part of the beach. Maybe it gets even a little brighter and more yellow. And even if you go like, oh, this one's too bright over here. Well, just by doing it lightly, you go, okay, there's the color I want. Pick that one. And then go back and lighten that up. You can do the eraser trick, or you can just grab the blue of the water. Lighter, whoops, lighter. Tap some in. Go, oh, that's too blue. We'll try to find a color that's in between. Oh, that's too blue on top. Let's get some green back in there. This is what real painters have to do, where they just go back and forth, back and forth. blending, blending. And you're gonna go, oh, this looks awful. But you're so close up. Remember, you gotta go back every once in a while and go, oh, but here's the whole picture.
Yeah.
And then you go, okay.
We were painting, what were we painting? The buffalo, I think, in the watercolor class. And we were doing that back and forth, back and forth. One of the kids said, are we gonna paint this forever? When do we do
it
something
feels like
else?
it. Once you've got your mountains, you can even try doing your reflection. Layer, rotate, flip vertically.
They look so funny.
I know they do look funny. You got to put it under that one. Lighten it up. Of course, they're not going to match. You're going to have to do some editing there to make them match.
Doesn't reflection not work that way if it's like at that distance?
Yeah, that's why I'm erasing it. I'm erasing most of it so that it only shows a little bit. But I'm sure it depends on like how the light's hitting the water and all that kind of jazz. But just saying, it's possible.
If you had each of the mountains on a separate layer,
yeah, it'd be easier to do.
There.
Yeah, it'd be a lot easier to do. But I think it's more effective on the closer things, like Michaela's saying, like depending on how the light is reflecting and hitting your eye. Pretty sure the reflections will work better on closer things. No, I have anything on that side. Must be the side. All right, we have about 20 minutes left. That sounds like time to have some fun on your own.
Yes, I'm going to make a new splash in my picture.
All right.
Because I really like your splash, and I think I can do this.